Good morning and welcome to Beyond Borders. Wall covering for today. We're just going to hold for a couple minutes as people join us. And my word, does anyone believe that it's September 30th already?
Oh, I know. Unbelievable.
No.
Although that's a good thing in a way, because it means the year will end soon.
Get it over with.
It's a year that just keeps giving more and more.
It's been the longest year that's also flying by.
Yes, yes, that's excellent.
I think we're going to constantly say, wait, that happened? Wait, and that also happened? And did that also? That was 2022? Like, I think keep saying those things.
Looking back, I think whoever isn't alive yet is not going to believe our story. It's like, you know, climbing up the hill both directions in the snow to go to school. That's right.
I love it.
I do feel that is a bit our struggle right now with even like work stuff. Don't you guys feel like you're working harder to get product and like it's like constantly we're moving around just to try to get our hands on stuff?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everything is back ordered. Everything is pushed back. Lead times are so long. It's crazy. It's crazy.
And you know, between COVID and then holiday season upon us.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I think a lot of the vendors pushed their holiday date up by like a month, I think, if not sooner. So I was really surprised to see that, but you know, it is what it is. We've got it.
It's also because everyone is much busier.
Everyone is so busy.
For industry.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Our homes are our sanctuary now, and I think that that's so important for our industry to be able to bring that to fruition for clients. And we just want to do it faster or on normal speed.
Guys, won't it be beautiful when all of this settles out and look how easy it'll feel? You know what I mean? We're like, dang, this is easy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start introducing our panelists for today. I'm going to start with Erika Bonnell, known for her trademark style of approachable glamour and no-nonsense attitude. Erika brings her design creativity and fierce attention to budget to all her projects. Her business is based in Loudoun County, Virginia, and caters to private residents in the DC area. She's been named a top interior designer several times, and her work has been published both nationally and regionally. Welcome, Erika.
Yeah.
Next up, we've got Iantha Carley. For the past 16 years, Iantha has created living spaces that are stylish, timelessly elegant, and functional. She's well known for her creative mix of color, pattern, and texture. Since May 2020, what a year this has been, Iantha has hosted a weekly Instagram live called DC Design Matters, highlighting design creatives, artisans, and allies living and working in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. Welcome, Iantha.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Next up, we've got Duval Reynolds. He's a residential interior designer based in the city of Fairfax, Virginia. His projects range from one-room turnkey deliverables to completely custom homes, partnering with developers to offer design for new build homes. His style can be defined as personable and resolved, but where possible, he likes to go seductive.
Ooh.
Right now, he's exploring a modern farmhouse look, so take a look at his YouTube for his interior design episode series. And then last but certainly not least, Jessica Williamson is the principal designer and owner of JTW in Richmond, Virginia. After graduation from Virginia Tech, she joined the world-renowned Gensler in Washington, DC. 10 years later, Jessica turned her focus from commercial to residential design by creating a boutique design studio focused on working with clients to create classic, approachable designs. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you.
Hey.
Okay, everyone, we're going to start with an icebreaker here. Since we're talking about evolution and here and now, it only makes sense to start with the past. Erika,
Yes.
give us a fond memory you have of a wall covering or a room with wall covering from your time.
Which was a long time ago, but we won't get into all that. So we're actually working with one of your papers right now, the Pegnoris. And when I saw this, it reminded me, and actually your backdrop right there, of my childhood room. When I was young, we papered the ceiling in this really beautiful butterfly wallpaper. And then we cut out, because there were probably about 10 different butterflies in the paper, we cut out all the butterflies and we placed them all around the room. So it just looked like there were these floating butterflies all around my bedroom. So these papers just take me right back to that.
And how about for you?
You said for me?
For you.
So we grew up in the South, and we grew up in a single wide trailer. And then when we moved to a double wide trailer, which was amazing, we actually had that bordered wallpaper at the ceiling. And then I think it acted as the chair railing. And so it was basically like us getting colored pencil drawings on our wall. And so that was amazing. That was my first.
It had to be Waverly. It had to be Waverly.
Probably so.
Yep.
And Iantha, how about you?
Oh, I remember the very first wallpaper I ever used. I don't know, probably somewhere between 8 and 10, where my mom let me decorate my room. And I was really into Twiggy and that whole Carnaby Street vibe. And I found this wallpaper that was so mod. It was women with, you know, like their Mary Quant outfits and white go-go boots, and it was multicolored. That was the wallpaper in my bedroom. I had a yellow Parsons table that I used as a desk. That room, it still stays with me. I loved it.
You were a stylish child.
Yes. I came out of the womb with style.
Oh my gosh.
And Jessica, what about you?
So when I was also a little girl, I had an affinity for shopping for wallpaper and fabrics and whatnot. My mom would take me to the store called Classic Touches here in Richmond, and it was just a dream. And so finally, after years and years of coveting the Waverly Sweet Violet pattern, literally Waverly, I was able to convince her to purchase the border around my room. And I have to say, it's funny because the Betty from Schumacher, which I have here, it reminds me so much of that paper. And it's interesting, these little feelings of memories that you don't even realize are connected until you kind of think back on it. So this question actually made me realize how much similar this is to the Waverly pattern, and it does make me feel at home, I think, and you know, kind of that likewise innocence that I had felt like when I was in my childhood room. So it was a good question.
For me, I would say my first foray into wall covering was my grandmother's house. And it's not the granny chic that we think of today that people are designing with. Her favorite color was green. Her living room was green. Walls, upholstery, carpets. And I have to say, I would love to spend time there now. It was this gold flocked wallpaper, like a small trellis pattern. I would say at the time it was not chic. Right now, it would be super chic.
Sounds amazing.
I kind of have an affinity for a flocked wallpaper because of my grandmother.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's dive into the present day. Fast forwarding where we are now. And Duval, I'm going to start with you.
Yep.
Your projects. How frequently do you use wall covering? And what determines that for you?
I determine that, and we always do it, and as often as possible. That's actually the answer. But honestly, we propose wall coverings to every project that we do. There hasn't been a project for the last several years that we have not brought wallpaper in, whether it's on the wall, ceilings, whether we do accents, powder rooms, etc. But we do a wall treatment in every project, and we determine it mostly by, I guess our clients are finding us and they want a more finished space, and that's what we're hearing about a lot. And I feel like wallpaper, more than anything, can help finish those negative spaces better than anything else. And so we use it any chance we get.
And since you're using so much of it, how are those client conversations if they have concerns about wallpaper?
I don't think we have a lot of pushback as far as concerns for wallpaper goes. A lot of them, if they don't know anything about it, it's just a matter of showing it to them. Really, once you put it in their hands, once you show them images of it full scale, I think clients maybe not have a good idea of how the print will be repeated, or they may be concerned about seams, things like that. But when you show it to them in scale, I think it answers all the questions. Of course, we can go into like the practicality of it being easy to clean, especially when you're going to vinyls, how they're sustainable, fire resistant. We can give all those factors if the clients are asking about it. But for the most part, once you show them and you show them in the context of the rest of the space, it basically sells itself.
And Iantha, how about you? How frequently are you using wall covering?
I also use wall coverings in just about every project. I mean, there's certain rooms that I think it's mandatory.
Here's a mandatory.
Yeah, I think I think it's mandatory in a powder room, because they're generally, what's exciting about a powder room? I think it can make it a little jewel box. I think often in the dining room, because usually the surrounding rooms around it are painted, so it just sets it off from all the other rooms. Like laundry rooms, it's a place where you wouldn't expect to see wallpaper. So I do like to, I use it in every project, use wall coverings in every project.
And for you also, how do you handle client concerns if there may be less on board with wanting to paper or cover their walls with something other than paint?
Usually my clients are on board. The wall covering that gets the most resistance is grass cloth, which I love. And everyone has memories of their parents' homes or their grandmother's home that had this hideous grass cloth. And so I had to explain, well, this isn't 1960s grass cloth. This is like 2000 grass cloth. It's a totally different animal. And once they see it, you know, they're on board. But the grass cloth seems to be the hardest sell.
Interesting. And Jessica, I know that you love your wall covering. I see what you're sitting in front of right now. Schumacher's Betty. And how frequently are you using wall covering in your projects?
So we also use it quite frequently. And I think a lot of the ways that we like to use it is also to define spaces, kind of like Iantha was saying. We can also use it in transition spaces. If you're kind of peering from one room into the next, we can sometimes play with the use of scale and texture and to allow the rooms to talk to each other in a different way than they would if it was just a paint. And I think, you know, we feel like it doesn't always have its place in every single room, but because I think then that way it's not special. So we like to really celebrate the use of it in a really special way and in an unexpected way, to make sure that it is creating and that feeling that you're really trying to invoke in your projects.
And Erika, last but certainly not least.
Same. I think for me, it's pretty much what everyone here has said. We use a tremendous amount of wallpaper. We use it in every project. We do every now and then get a little pushback. And for us, we're not gonna force someone to do something they're not comfortable with. But we try to educate. And I think for us, what we've seen is people's memory of what paper was back in the day, where you had floral paper, floral border, you know, a pier floral cheryl border, where it was just on and on and on. And I think so many people had horror stories of removing papers back in the day when it was just paper overload. So for us, it really is just educating people. We do it in a lot of transitional spaces also because it makes those transitional spaces just so interesting. We like to create moments everywhere, and we like to be really creative with the use of paper. I mean, you know, like I said, when I was young, we cut out the butterflies and placed it on the wall. Sometimes, like here in our office, we cut the paper to lay it in a different way than was made to lay it. So you can do so much with paper. It really can function as art. You know, it can provide layers, it can provide artistic value. There is so much paper can do. So we love it. And actually on our website, it's one of our 6 project must-haves. There you go.
Is it bad that if some of us force our clients to do it? Is that bad?
No.
Yes, and you love it at the end of the day.
That's awesome.
So I certainly, a few of you touched upon it now of where you like to use it and where you may not like to use it. I'd love to hear you all weigh in on that and how you incorporate it with art versus just texture. Iantha, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I think the only, there's not too many places where I wouldn't use wallpaper. It all depends on the flow of the house. I mean, each project is different. I mean, I know personally, a personal story is when I moved into my first house with my first husband, we wallpapered every room, the entryway, the living room, the dining room, and then I got pregnant and I was on sort of bed rest. I could only come down once a day. And I'd sit in my living room and I was like, what the hell did I, all this wallpaper. I was like, oh my God. The first thing I did after I had my daughter is we took down the wallpaper in the living room and the entryway. I mean, so I learned my lesson, like you can overdo a good thing. So
A good way to say that.
Yep.
yeah. So, I mean, I you know, it's all sort of project by project for me.
That's good.
And Jessica, how about you? Are there any definite places you use it or any places that are typically off limits?
So I would say the only place that is off limits for us, and just talking about general paper, would probably be in bathrooms that have like steam showers and things like that. A lot of times, even if you use a super high quality paper, there can be problems down the road. Now, we might use them in like a back of a bookcase in a bathroom that has a shower. But if you have any sort of environment that's having a lot of steam, that can be sort of problematic down the road. You know, I think for me, it's also about what type of paper it is. Like I wouldn't use a grass cloth in a home that has cats down to the floor. I might do sort of a wainscot or something, you know, that would be terrible for those. Happy for the cats, not so much for the budget and for the longevity. So I would say for us, again, just like Iantha said, it's a lot about what type of paper it is and what's the use. Also, you know, depending on the scale of the room, we might choose to use a different scale of pattern. Maybe it's a huge pattern in a small space for lots more time. So I think just kind of that busyness factor, is that an celebrated something or is that too much? But really there aren't many rooms that are off limits. It's more about function, I think, than anything.
And Erika, how about for you? Any areas that are must-haves or typically stay away from?
So the same, bathrooms, small bathrooms that might get heavy steam, they always stress me out. And I have a couple of my own personal experiences that we put grass cloth in a hallway and I didn't think the cats were going to scratch it. Sure enough, they scratched it. So do not do grass cloth with cats. It's so tempting. And then I am not a big DIYer, but I tried to do paper in my kid's bathroom years and years ago, and I used bad paste and the stuff started falling off the wall. So I learned my lesson. There will be no DIY wallpaper hanging for me in the future.
And we got a great question from Laura Pittman, And just for everyone's FYI, at the end of our session, we're gonna have a Q&A, but this is a perfectly timed question. How do you incorporate art with pattern wall coverings? Or should the paper just stand alone? Duval, I want to start with you.
Sure. I think that is a really good question. A lot of our wall coverings that we use are pretty simple as far as the prints go. We use a lot of textured wallpaper. So for us, wall art isn't a huge issue. So it's basically just putting art on a textured paint. If we were to go to something that did have more print, like what's behind you, Matthew, we may just consider some matte board to just kind of separate the print itself or the artwork itself so that it feels like it's a standalone moment. But I think for us, we haven't had a lot of that. So I'd love to hear what these other designers say.
Iantha, how about for you?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same, Duval. So you're doing a great job. No. Yeah, I mean, I do like to use a lot of grass cloths with, if my clients have a large art collection, just because that's the star, the art collection. And it's just nice to have that extra texture. It just adds a little more interest to the room. But you know, I have used pattern paper with art, and I mean, yeah, you just have to kind of find the piece that works with the wallpaper, or the wallpaper that works with the piece, whichever comes first. I mean, there's really no formula to it. It's one of those things where you just know it works when you see it. At least that's for me.
And Jessica, what's your approach?
So I think very similar. You know, if you're going to do a whole room that has a wallpaper on it, like for instance, if you used a big floral print all over an entire room, like a powder room or something, I would be more inclined to use more of a graphic, more an abstract type of a piece, again, sort of matted and framed appropriately so that there was a connection between the two, but not a conflict between the two. The other thing is kind of using trim work and using your wallpaper and wall coverings appropriately to kind of balance scale. I mean, behind me, we have a piece of art that we've balanced in between. So it connects back to the wallpaper because the colors are very, very similar. However, the board and batten tends to break it up and allow all three to connect together simultaneously, while not anything sort of stealing the show. It still allows the wallpaper to be the show though, even though I love this art, but it still allows some presence there too. So.
And Erika, what's your approach with incorporating art and wall covering?
So I feel like I'm a little different from the other panelists here. I do enjoy mixing art on patterned papers. I like more of a collected, funkier approach there. And you know, sometimes you can put a cool, interesting patterned paper that just, it becomes the backdrop to the art. And like Duval said, also, I do sometimes like a bigger mat so that you get good separation, but I think it's really cool and eclectic to have cool papers layered with art over top. I just like that heavier, more collected look.
Can we ask questions? I know that I'm not sure if we're jumping script. I have some questions.
What's on your mind?
Okay, great. Because I want to know, so say with Erika, each one of you really, okay, kind of jumping on this question, when you have a print, are you more inclined, and I guess this may depend on the client, is to take your frame itself, and should that be a harsh contrast to the print? Should that fade into the print? So if your print has blacks, or my screen, but if your print has black in it, are you more likely to use a black frame, etc.? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
So is this more about frame selection?
Yeah, frame selection as in regards to how it, because that's what's sitting on the print mostly.
Yeah, so it's funny because when I go to my frame shop and I have the art with me, my framer, who I love, he always wants to select the frame for the art. And I'm always like, no, we can't do this frame because this doesn't at all work with all of the other elements that are going on in the room, because it's just very much like when you're focused on one tiny thing. For us, we're big picture people. So oftentimes I'll take all of my samples into the framer so that he can understand also what we're doing here. And hey, this frame needs to be much more subdued, which might not be what your inclination would have been when you looked at the art. So we select framing with the whole room in mind, very much like we do paint color as well.
Iantha or Jessica, you want to weigh in on that one?
I'd agree with Erika. I think it really does have to do with the entire composition and what you're trying to achieve. Is it a chunkier feel where there is more contrast to the backdrop? Is it a more lighter, airy feel where you do want everything to kind of recede and be more tonal? I think it really just depends on the feel overall that you're trying to achieve, really.
And it's so instinctual too, you know.
Yeah.
So you got to have all this.
Yeah,
It's just really
absolutely.
instinctual. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said earlier, it's one of those things where in your mind, you know exactly what you're looking for, and then you come across it. I mean, it's not something I think you can, you know, concretely plan out. I mean, you just know it when you see it.
Yeah.
100%.
Good question though.
Nice, Duval.
Erika, you had a great suggestion in bringing your samples to the framer, like you would when you're shopping for anything else in the room.
Right.
Exactly. I take all the pictures of the room as well. And it is funny because it totally changes the person. Like my framer's like, oh yeah, now I see why that makes sense. So it's just like finding a lampshade for your lamp. You need to take the lamp base to fit your shade to it. You don't just take dimensions, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to ask you all a little bit about performance. It's become such a popular topic for homes, and certainly we see it a lot with fabrics and everything gets treated or some sort of easy care. What about wall covering? How important is performance or performance treatment for walls? Let's start with Iantha.
Oh, it's not that important to me because I think realistically everyone cares about, or they say they care about performance, but they never really wash their walls. So, so it's sort of like, will this hold up in the such and such a place? I'm like, yeah, well, when was the last time you washed these walls? It's like, you never have. So, I mean, of course you want something, if you have wallpaper near a water source, you definitely want it to be able to withstand that kind of daily use. So, I mean, so to me, it's only related to those kind of things, like where is the wallpaper going? You know, if you have little kids, you know, do they run their hands along the wall? I mean, so you have to take those kind of things into account.
And Jessica, how about for you? You do have kids.
I do have children, yes, and we use our paper in very strategic spots. I mean, our kids, we've trained them as a designer, trained them pretty tightly not to
Get your hands off that wall.
I want to be one of those moms that's like, messes are beautiful, but I'm just not that mom, but that's okay. But I would say for us, sometimes where a performance paper would be really helpful is in a case where, like, if you have cats and you really still want the look of a grass cloth, quite frankly, I have been so encouraged by the use of vinyl grass cloths and how beautiful they actually look. I think that, you know, I feel like performance paper used to really be only for the commercial industry.
Yeah.
And so I used tons and tons and tons of it until I was just sick of it. And I think that's why I was like, let's go to residential. It's so beautiful. And so, so I've been really encouraged to see some of those vinyls coming into the residential arena in such a beautiful textural way. It used to feel just very flat and kind of cold and, you know, doctor's office-y, and now I feel like they've really been celebrated. So in areas where you really do have a situation where a natural paper wouldn't work or a regular paper would not work. I do think they've been great. There are some great offerings out there now that were not there before.
And Erika, you specifically mentioned transitional spaces, which I feel like can sometimes get a bit more wear and tear.
Yes, it depends on the particular transitional space. Lots of little vestibules that aren't used as often, but I too had children, and most of my clients, I would say, are families with kids, and we are very mindful about the paper we select, because there is a whole lot of wall washing going on in the houses of my clients. So we are strategic in placement of those papers, and we are strategic in what the paper is made of. And there's also so many cool things you can do. I know for myself personally, I'm debating whether or not I want to do paper on my kitchen backsplash and cover it with plexiglass. I mean, there's stuff that you can do. There's also treatments that you can put over papers to really use it in unusual places, but protect it from things that may harm it, you know.
And Duval, however for you, you use so much texture in your projects.
Yeah. I feel like I'm echoing everything they say. For some people, the same way Iantha said, like, you're never going to wash that wall. Please stop talking about that. and then there are some clients you're like encouraging them, please go wash your wall.
Yes.
So of course it depends on the client, obviously. But yeah, we want to be mindful of those things. And you know, now people are, and I guess with performance, I don't know if that is also kind of like this topic of sustainability, and like now they're using recycled material inside of these papers, and we're reducing our carbon footprint. So these are some of the factors that we can use when trying to sell the paper. But as far as performance goes, I'm echoing everything that they're saying. It's the same thing.
Well, Duval, you brought us to my next question about how to create, right?
Okay.
It's 2020. We have a lot of technological advancements that have really changed what is offered in the world of wall covering. So my question for each of you, how important is it to you how things are made? Whether it's handmade versus mass production or impact on the environment? Duval, you're gonna lead us off.
First off, is it still 2020? God, will it end? That's the first thing. As far as, so that's a great question, by the way. And yeah, we are being more mindful. And I think the great thing is that our industry is moving so much toward sustainability in all products, in all aspects. It almost is just a part of the game. And if there isn't a huge level of like, we're not forcing that on our clients. It's just a part of the processes that everyone's taking. Everyone's being more mindful. So the kudos to the vendors, the manufacturers, these new designers, these industrial designers who are doing that. It really is making our job easier to really create sustainable spaces for the clients without doing too much excessive work where years past it would have been. Going back to the like that handcraft made and the mass production for us and our current clientele, having everything handmade and hand selected and different isn't quite their concern. Most of our clients are coming to us for concepts. So we create concepts for their rooms. We create narratives that, you know, take them into the next level of their life. We elevate the spaces in a much grander scale. So the pieces that we're giving them just fit into the concept we designed. So it isn't really standout pieces. So mass production for us is not a bad thing. It's not a bad term. But I don't think we have those clients yet that are wanting that one piece from Italy that they saw 20 years ago and, you know, flown in. But if they want it, we'll give it to them.
Erika, I'm gonna throw this one over to you.
Oh, we were talking about
Handmade versus mass production.
So
and
into
the environment.
Duval's like listening to him. Okay, we do both. And I would say driving factor is quite often budget and exclusivity. Some clients, like Duval said, it really is understanding the client. Some clients do not want anything that someone else could possibly have. That really is a custom creation. And we love when we get to work on those, but those are fewer and farther between. Because also like Duval, a good bulk of our clients, they just want it to look great. And sometimes the more mass produced fit into the budget better. I do love whenever we can work in a gorgeous paneled mural paper or something as a special piece here and there that almost serves as art. But it really is, we do enjoy both. We have a couple of local artisans that do wonderful papers that we're lucky to get to work with every now and then. So I'm happy with both of them.
And Iantha, how about for your projects?
Yeah, I use a mix of wall coverings that are, you know, handmade as opposed to, and also mass produced. I mean, it all depends, goes back once again to me, to the project. And a lot of times, since I have a background in textiles, you know, I'm always pulling samples of, even if it's not for the if I just come across something that I like, and then, you know, it's in my library up here, you know, to find the perfect project for it. So, I mean, I like to use both. And I think that the mass manufacturers have definitely know the competition is, you know, with the handmade, and they've taken steps to, you know, institute the same type of protocols to produce their papers in a more environmentally friendly way. I mean, I don't know how many of you remember the times where you pretty much had to leave your windows open for a week when you put wallpaper up because the solvents were so strong. I mean, you could definitely get high. I mean, don't you remember flipping through wallpaper books and that
The smell of the book, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you would be stoned by the time you left the wallpaper.
We are dating ourselves. Stop it. Duval and Jessica are like, whoa.
Oh, I remember that. Don't worry.
That's why it was like how moms got a cheap high. I mean, you go to look for wallpaper.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I love it.
So, I mean, you don't get that anymore. I mean, so it is like, you know, I'm glad to see that, you know, everyone's, you know, on the environmental train.
And Jessica, how about for you?
So I would say in terms of the handcrafted, handmade versus sort of the mass production, we haven't had a lot of clients pulling us for sustainability. And it's something that I focus so much on commercially. It's interesting. I feel like I'm encouraged by the fact, again, like you all have said, that the manufacturers are doing that. So it's not something that we have to make a choice about now as much as we used to, which is good. So I'm happy about that. But in terms of just the handcrafted versus mass production, I think, again, much like Erika said, so much of it does come down to budget and exclusivity. And, you know, we have very few clients that really are really pulling us to select those items for them like that. However, we are always open to looking at and encourage our team to really look at some of those smaller manufacturers that are doing some beautiful block prints and just some absolutely lovely things with wallpaper and textiles. And so I feel like sometimes the price doesn't work for that because there is so much that goes into a handcrafted paper. That we kind of end up having to price those out as options price them as the opportunities because they're just a little bit more expensive. But I do think it really just depends on our clients and what's important to them and where their budget sits.
So now I want to talk to you all about installation. Erika shared her lovely DIY experience, and I personally also am not going to ever install wallpaper for anyone, because that's what professionals are for and they're better at it. How do we choose a wallpaper installer that we can trust to do a good job for us? I'm going to throw this directly to Erika because we both share a collaborator, Jose Villatoro. Hello, Jose. Erika, how did you find him? Or how did you find a good installer?
So For us, a good experienced installer is worth their weight in gold.
Yes. Yes.
Seriously, and Jose is fantastic. There are so many little tricks and things you think about when you're working with wallpaper. I mean, even to the, are you going to prime your walls to be similar to the background, or even paint strips where you anticipate your seams being, so that when your seams shrink, you don't see a white wall behind on a, you know, charcoal black wallpaper. For us, you know, our trades are an extension of us. So we want to make sure that the people that we have doing this work are experienced and knowledgeable, and don't mess around. You know, Jose comes in, he sets up, he gets to work. He's not chatty Cathy with the clients all day long. I mean, we're there to do a job. So, and he cleans up beautifully, and the work is always beautiful. And he's just a very pleasant personality. So, it is crucial to us to have a really great installer. And if you have a great installer, you won't even think twice about the DIY stuff. So make sure you got a good one.
And Jessica, I'll offer this to you. So how do you really know, if you haven't worked with someone before, what are you looking for to decide if you're going to hire them or not as an installer?
I would say their attention to detail is a big one, and their communication, the way they communicate with you, and as Erika said, with the client. I mean, that's huge. We hear so often, you know, we have said use several different people here in Richmond, and you know, we've narrowed that focus over the years because of just that. You know, it's got to be a great personality fit too. I would say the people that we love the most are the ones who ask us all those right questions, and are really thinking about, they're like, okay, well, how is the paper packaged? How many, you know, are you buying it by the yard? Are you buying it by the roll? They're able to make appropriate assessments of how much we need to buy, so that we don't have to deal with die lot issues and buying more and the client being upset. I mean, all of those things can happen and have happened in projects, and they're no good for anybody. And so we try to always make sure that we have, even if we're looking at 3 different options before the person goes out to measure, we tend to give them all that information so that we can all be aware of what the opportunities are with the different packaging types that are out there with all the different manufacturers. And even within manufacturers, the rolls of goods are priced and packaged in different ways. And so making sure that we work with somebody who knows that and is going to ask us those questions. And if something is packaged in a minimum yardage requirement, and we just need 1 more yard, being able to say to them, hey, instead of having to buy an entirely different roll, could we try and maneuver the paper in a way, because of the cuts and the way that it's working around the doorways and whatnot, to be able to only have to buy X amount of goods? And them saying that yes or no in a very confident way, because again, you don't want to have to order paper down the road once you're already in the installation process. So I would say those are the things that are really important to us when we're looking at an installer.
And how about you? How do you select a good installer?
I have to sleep with mine. He's my husband.
I love it.
I hope my kids aren't listening to this. They're probably like, oh, Mom.
That's how they got here.
Yeah, so my husband is a contractor who I use exclusively, and he does, amongst other things, he does all my painting and wall coverings. So I never have to worry.
That is pretty convenient.
It is very convenient.
And Duval, I know you're not in the same circumstance. So how do you go about finding someone?
If they're good, I might sleep with them. I don't know. So, wallpaper installers. I mean, the camera. The wallpaper installers are such a specialty and niche market. Like, if you use it as much as we all do, we understand how valuable they are. Mine actually came from a referral from another designer, and I walked into one of her rooms, and the wallpaper was so seamless. I was just in awe. And so she gave me his name, and I've used him exclusively for the last couple years. And unfortunately, not like Erika, they are chatty Cathys, and I'm always like, please stop talking to the
I'm like,
client.
stop it.
So sometimes I have to warn the client, like, I think you should be out of the house. Let them
It's
do
like,
it.
don't make eye contact.
Yeah. It's the fumes. Yeah, the fumes are bad. It's the guys. They are super chatty, but they've done us so well, and so we make sure we keep them busy.
It's beautiful.
And so we've all done this before. We haven't always been perfect. Sometimes we've made mistakes we've learned from. Let's talk do's and don'ts. What I wish I knew.
Yeah.
I want to start with Iantha on this one.
Oh.
Aside from marrying an installer, what advice do you have for people?
My main advice would never do it yourself. And when you hire someone, I mean, everyone doesn't hire a designer, you know, to pick wall covering. So I think that there's certain things you should know is like primarily make sure they prime your walls. You know, I can't tell you the number of times, you know, I've gone on a project and we've had to remove the wallpaper and then the walls have to be skim coated because the previous installer or homeowner didn't prime the wall. So I would say the most critical thing would be to make sure your walls are properly primed.
That's good.
And by primed, Iantha means a smooth surface. No matter how straight you think your walls are, they can probably always do some smoothing out.
Yep.
I think we all learned that the hard way when there's suddenly a bump here, like a pimple. Not good. Don't want that.
Yeah.
No pimples in your wallpaper. Jessica, what are your do's and don'ts when it comes to wallpaper?
Well, there's so many. I would say don't be afraid to take risks. That's a big one, I think. I think sometimes when people look at large scale prints, they might say, oh my gosh, it's going to be so busy. But quite frankly, sometimes smaller scale prints can be worse. So I think just not being afraid of taking those risks. Do pay attention to your budget. If you're looking at doing an entire room or doing a small area, pay attention to the repeat of the wallpaper, because inevitably you have to buy a lot more of the paper because of large repeats than you would if it were a smaller repeat. I think use a professional for hanging for sure. That's a big one. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of my top ones. I do have, yeah, there's lots, but yes, those are good ones. And pay attention to your application, like where you're using it, grass cloth, regular paper, performance paper, those kind of things too.
Duval, I'll shoot this one back to you.
Yeah, sure. My first one is like, the don't fear it. That's always a good one. But my biggest don't is probably don't leave all of the decisions in the hands of the installer. That's probably my biggest thing. They shouldn't be making decisions on everything in regard to where should some of the seams hit, or what, you know, when you open a powder room, what's the first visual interest do you have? And if you have a print, you want it scaled so that that makes the impact. Sometimes installers can, you know, install it in the way that's easiest for them, which makes sense, but it may not be the best way for laying the paper out. Especially when you have repeats. Same way if it hits a corner or if it's hitting a windowsill, you may not particularly like how something lines up. I think that is a discussion you should have with them and not assume that they know where these things are going to go. And that is clearly out of experience, as you can tell. So I think that would be my two don'ts.
And Erika?
Kind of agree with Duval. I mean, I agree with everyone, obviously, but again, way back in the day, a client, we'd gotten this really cool damask wallpaper, and the client handled the install or the management of the installer. And I came for a visit one day after, and the paper was upside down, the whole room. So,
oh my gosh.
not anything, because I could not do that to her, but seriously, you do need to direct your installer. I mean, like if you're using a scenic paper and the panel is 12 feet long and you've got a 9-foot ceiling, you need to direct them where that stop and start is. You need to direct them of what is up, because not always is it super clear to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is, just give good direction and don't be scared of it. Jump in.
Right.
Yeah.
Matthew, can I mention one more thing? Because this is
Absolutely.
something my husband comes across when people call him and say, oh, can you come in, I bought wallpaper, can you come in, install? And they've ordered it, but they haven't ordered enough of it.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on having, a room covered, it would be good for you to call the installer ahead of time and have them measure for you so you know exactly how much.
Yes.
I mean, everyone goes by that chart, like deduct a roll for an opening, and that's not right. So I would really say have a professional measure so that you have enough wall covering on site to complete the job.
Jumping on that with her, we don't do any installation without them measuring first. We will make sure to get our estimates, we give them an idea, and we do our elevations for them so they clearly see where the obstacles are. But before we go, they need to go measure it just in case, because you never know.
Yeah.
I'm going to echo that sentiment because we see it from sort of the other side, right? So someone may have ordered wallpaper for a project, and then the installer comes to install it, and suddenly we need just one more roll, and your die lot's no longer available.
Right.
Installer was brought in just a little bit earlier, all of this would have been avoided because there's always some amount of waste.
Exactly.
Always.
It's a good rule of thumb to always order an extra roll if that's practical.
Yep.
Just so if you do have to spot something, or if you do have switch plates that need covering, there maybe isn't an appropriate scrap for it. Those details are really what make the big difference in the end.
Yeah.
My other tip, because I'm going to share mine, especially when it comes to grass cloth or anything that's got a natural woven fiber, it's natural. It will have variation. So before you cut anything, open it up and lay it out on the floor, or shade it is what it's called, to make sure that the room has an even flow. Because you don't want to start with your darkest piece and then finish that wall and suddenly everything is light.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work anymore.
Good point.
So that's my tip. Look at it all before you get started. Inspect before you get started. Jessica, you wanted to add something?
I'm gonna add one other thing too, to the natural papers. I think that it's really, really important, if you have never used those papers before, look at them installed too. Because, the seams of a natural paper are very apparent. And if you've never seen that, it might not work for you. You may say, I love the look of it on the sample, but I hate the way it looks installed. And then you've spent a fair amount of money getting that done, and it's no good for anything.
You will always have a seam with a grass cloth.
That's right. And it's I think it's beautiful. I love the look of seam on a grass cloth, but there is nothing worse than someone saying, I don't.
And that's fine, that's preference, and then maybe pick something else.
That's right.
So I wanted to talk to you all about where we see things heading in terms of what's available out there. There are numerous design styles today in contrast to where they were, let's say, 50 years ago with the offering. And we've got grass cloths, we've got paper weaves, which are similar but cousins. We've got lots of murals, and Erika's mentioned them a few times too. So I want to talk about what do we like, what do we want to see more of, and maybe what we don't really want to see. Let's talk about murals, panel prints. What are your thoughts? Do we like them? Do we want to see things in a different direction? Let's start with Erika. She's been the panel woman today.
So I am all for the panels. They're just beautiful. They are statement pieces. Really what I'm enjoying and what I want to see more of, I love the artist paper collaborations where you are getting art put, you know, it's transferred to the paper. We use a lot of those. We really love those. And I also like the funkier vibes out there, you know, there's just so much cool and interesting that you can do with wallpaper. I mean, you can be so creative. So to me, give it to me all. The traditionals, the murals, the funkies, the artistic. I will take every bit of wallpaper you hand at me.
You want a full box of crayons.
Give it all. Yep.
What about for you, Iantha?
I'm with Erika all the way on that. I mean, the offerings are just so vast and so many are just so beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I just can't get enough of them. I love them all. I love them, I really do.
And Duval, you tend to go very texturally driven with your walls, but every so often you'll throw in maybe a floral on something, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's from his YouTube channel.
No,
what about for you?
I'm like Erika, like give me the box of crayons, the colored pencils, I want the markers, make sure I have scissors and tape. Like I'm all in all the way. But for some reason, I don't know if this is bad, if I'm behind the times, I'm leaning so heavily toward anything that has a sparkle in it. And I know this may seem tacky for some people, but there have been wallpapers that come out, they have just the slightest bit of just a sheen and a sparkle that when the light hits, it just feels refreshed. And just something about that, we're doing a lot of that in our ceilings now, along with the floral prints. We've been asked about that a number of times. But we have this couple houses actually, where in the coppered ceilings, we're doing a pattern that has a little bit of sparkle so that when the light in the ceiling shoots out, it just a slight reflection more. And it's creating an impact, I think, that we just haven't seen with other papers. And so for me, we're going for it.
That's a little bit like a makeup highlighter. Little shimmery.
Yes, a makeup highlighter.
There you go.
I should have put some.
Exactly. Just a little sparkle. It's all we need.
That's all we need.
And Jessica, what do you want to see more of?
I am loving so many of the papers that look like they've been hand painted. I'm sort of in a wash watercolor sort of way. I know Schumacher just came out with one that I was just with the repeat was just, I mean, it's just, I died when I saw it. It was so exciting. And I think for me, like just the walls as art, I love that moment. I'm really big on sort of architectural integrity and kind of making sure that anything you adorn your walls with feels architectural as well as feeling artistic. And I think for me, like just having that be sort of like a surround is just very, very special. And as much as I absolutely loved my Waverly border, I'm not sure if the borders having a moment have been where I've been wanting to see that going right now. That's the only thing I would say I probably don't want to see too much more of. And maybe it's because I got too much of it as a child. I don't know. I love the print, but yeah. I think it feels a little bit more applied. And I think, again, that's just for my personal feelings about anything that you're putting on your walls. It should feel a little bit more architectural and artistic than adorned, I guess I would say.
So I wanted just to open up questions to our friends who are listening. We've gotten a few already. And here's a really great question from Nancy. And I am not going to pronounce her last name. I'm sorry. I will butcher it. And here's a great question. For those of you who do work with renters or use temporary paper, what are your thoughts on that?
Love it.
Love it.
Because I love it. Duval.
Love it. Yeah.
Jessica?
I've never used it. Maybe I'm totally behind the times, but I've never had an application where we've had to use it, but I think it's amazing. I'm so happy that people have, that they've put it out on the market and that it's an opportunity for people who don't want to commit to something for a long time or are in a rental situation and don't want to, and their landlord says, absolutely no. I think it's fantastic.
Now, for those of you who are using it, do you use it in owned homes or just with temporary projects?
if we were to use it, probably with temp paper will go with the temporary project, so like a rental. But like Erika was making mention of earlier, just also with temp paper, just kind of be comfortable using it in things that you probably wouldn't have used it in other areas. Like sometimes we can take a cool print that you like and then frame that, and that becomes a piece of artwork versus just the wallpaper. Or if you have flat surfaces that you actually want to use a temp paper on, like a desk or the back of a chair or a bench or something, be creative on how you use it. It just doesn't have to go on the wall. It doesn't only have to go on the ceiling. Paneling a door, the inset of a door panel. There are so many uses for temp paper that can be quick, easy fixes for a client who just wants more visual interest.
Well, and there are also the clients, you know, we do have people that will tell us right up front that they get tired of things, they bore, and they want to change every 3 to 5 years. Temp paper is perfect for those people.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's also perfect to use in kids' rooms. You know, it could just be an accent wall, but you know, it's a good thing to use because once they get tired of it in a couple of years, they outgrow that look. You know, you can try something else.
Can I ask another question? I'm so sorry. I'm just interested. I'm interested in this conversation.
Glad you're here for it then.
Okay, good. I'm here for this conversation. Accent walls, with Iantha saying that, what do y'all think about? Is it in? Is it out? Should we do it? Should we not do it? When do you do it? What do you think?
I'm all for an accent wall if it's a great wall covering. I'm not into painted accent walls at all, but I think a wall, a covered with paper accent wall can have a tremendous impact on a space. So I'm all for it.
When we do accent walls, it is typically because it supports the actual design that we're creating.
Okay.
You know, so it's you know, every now and then you will have the person who really desperately wants a cool paper and their budget won't support a whole room.
Yeah.
You know, so also those are great scenarios where you can design the accent wall, but make sure it's intentional and that it really supports the overall design.
Yes.
One of the tricks that we use when we are asked to do accent walls is a lot of times we'll use the background of the paper and paint the wall that color so that it almost feels like one envelope as opposed to just slapping a paper and then having totally different colored walls. And then that way it does feel like it's one cohesive room. And then like in the back of bookcases and things like that, I mean, I think if you can do it in a niche or in the back of a bookcase or as an accent on one wall, like a powder room wall or back of a bedroom wall or something like that, where there's a lot of other things going on, I think it can be actually quite beautiful and a good use of money too.
Yeah, agree.
I'm gonna start doing some of those. Good job, girls.
So here we have an interesting question that I would love to ask you about. If you're doing a wallpaper in, let's say, a guest bathroom, and it's a busier paper with birds and foliage and patterns, how do you select your towels?
Oh, that's easy.
Easy. Okay, Erika.
You do white with pretty embroider. I mean, done. Pick out one. So I'm a white towel fan anyway. And then if you pick out one of those colors in your paper and do embroidery out of that color, those towels will pop.
Anyone else have an opinion about that?
Same thing.
Same. Yeah, same.
Sounds like we have an answer to that question.
We have an answer, baby.
And so here's a question about boldness. And Jessica, you have a project that you've recently worked on with boldening up the walls of a space. How do you work with a client who's concerned about becoming bored with a bold print over years to come?
I think we would use something that was a little bit more textural or tone on tone that maybe had a cool print, but it was a little bit more subdued. I also think that, you know, there is some fear of becoming bored with things that you look at clearly, and wallpaper can seem very much like a permanent installation. So I can totally understand that there are fears with that. But I think if you have a client that is concerned, or if we had a client that was concerned about being bored of something, I would say we would just tone it down a little bit more and choose something that maybe will lend itself to choosing more bold decisions in other areas in the room, say with the pillows or an accent chair or something like that, that can allow us to really use it as a complement. But yeah, I mean, it's tricky when somebody has a fear of something. We try to get them over those fears first by showing them enough install images and asking them how they feel about things in their home currently and how long they've loved it versus how long they've not loved it or whatnot. But yeah, I think we just really have to listen and find an approachable opportunity elsewhere or whatnot.
So here we have an interesting question from Tarsha McCrae, and it's really about when something goes wrong, who pays for it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Good question. So the story here is basically that there was an installation that went wrong. And so we need to buy new paper. And do we split the cost with the homeowner? Does the installer pay for it? Who's responsible? Iantha, I'm gonna shoot this one over to you first.
Okay. Oh, thanks. Have you heard
Because it's
something?
your husband.
No, if the error is on my part, then I just go ahead and eat it. I mean, if it's on me, it doesn't seem fair to make the client pay for half of the paper or whatever. So it's the cost of doing business. Fortunately, those things, I think that has happened one time with me in 16 years. So, but yeah, I would just eat it.
Anyone have a different thought on that?
well, shit happens. I mean, it happens all the time. Stuff's going to happen. You do have to be prepared for it. It's figuring out what happened. Was it a miscut by the installer? If you're using a good installer, he's going to admit that it was a miscut. And most often he'll say, hey, I'm going to cover that. That was my fault. It really is such a case-by-case situation. If the error was at no fault of the client's, then the client should not be held accountable financially for this. And it is the professional's job to figure out the best solution to the situation. And each situation is so unique, and it's our job to figure out how to make it right. Unless of course the client hired the installer and maybe mismeasured the room or something happened, then it's the client's job to own up to responsibility.
That's correct. Yes.
It's really just a case-by-case situation, but do expect in this process, stuff happens. Be prepared for it and be open to discussion. It's all about discussion and communication.
And here we have a similar but unrelated, my mind is not working now. Let's try that again. When you are ordering additional paper for a project, how much is enough but not too much to cause a red flag with your client, since they do have to pay for it?
I think, well, I'm gonna jump in. I think that is a good question for your installer, for them to just know how much more paper they would need. I think Jessica, you might have said another role is good. But I think that is a conversation you have up front, setting expectations that are proper for the client. Just the same way that you leave some paint for the clients to do touch-ups, you leave wallpaper because, again, dialogue, colors change, and they'll need a knob. You can't just take a small fragment of a wallpaper and expect to cover it. The whole strip has to come down. So the client needs to be fully aware. But if you're concerned about that, I mean, I think it's also fine for you to take it to your own office if you have the storage space and leave it there, if you're very concerned for your client. But I think if you have the conversation up front, most clients are very understanding.
Well, so Duval, like with what you said, people really should try to keep an extra roll of paper on hand. I mean, again, shit happens. What if you have a water leak and it leaks right into the room that you had paper? Guess what? Paper's no longer available. What are you going to do for the repair? So it is always good to keep a little bit, preferably an unopened roll on hand, just in case anything should ever happen.
That's a really good tip. And then our last question, as we're wrapping things up, we're a couple minutes over because we're all chatty. For people who do use temp paper, do you have a recommendation of a company that you like to shop with?
For temp paper?
For temp paper.
Isn't it temppaper.com?
Is it temp paper?
It's temp paper, yep.
It's called temp paper.
Well, that's your answer.
There are a bunch, because I think, is it Mitchell Gold's? No, not Mitchell Gold. Mitchell something.
Mitchell Black.
Black.
They do, there's some smaller companies that do temp papers that offer really cool offerings. So, but temp paper is the big one.
They just did a collaboration with Forbes Masters, and they did their own set, and it's beautiful. So definitely take a look into that.
There really are so many cool options.
And so that's going to wrap us up. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm going to do a couple of Schumacher plugs because I work for Schumacher.
Do it.
So in case you aren't aware, the beginning of each month, Schumacher launches new collections. That's new collections every single month. Our September collection had a few different collections of new wallpaper, including wovens, panels, and toiles as well. And our next collection launch is on Monday, October 5th. So look out for that. And you can view all of our collections at fschumacher.com. And we're here if you need us too. So I'd really like to thank all of our panelists today, Erika Bonnell, Iantha Carley, Duval Reynolds, and Jessica Williamson. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
for the rest of your day.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you,
Bye,
Erika,
everyone.
Duval, Jessica.
Thank you guys.
Have a great day.
You
You
too.
too.